I sat frozen on my childhood bed as my father's voice thundered through the walls. "Get out, you lowlife." The words cut deep, despite my $20 million company and years of financially supporting them. They still saw me as worthless without a degree. I stared at my phone, the acquisition offer still open on the screen. Fine. 20 years of trying to earn their approval ended today. I wouldn't argue anymore. Tomorrow I'd be in my Florida beach house that they didn't even know existed. Sometimes walking away is the only path forward when the people who should love you unconditionally simply can't see your worth. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania, I learned early that my parents' love came with conditions. My father, Jack Thompson, served as the high school principal in our small town of Westbrook, strutting around like academic royalty. My mother, Amanda, worked as an administrator at the local community college. Together, they created a household where grades and degrees determined your value. From my earliest memories, dinner conversations revolved around educational achievements. Tracy got another A+ on her math test. My mother would announce proudly about my younger sister. Then they'd turn to me with that familiar disappointed look. "And Lee, how did your science test go?" The truth was, I learned differently than most kids. Traditional education felt like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I could grasp concepts quickly, but sitting still for hours memorizing facts made my mind wander. I'd spend class time dreaming up business ideas or sketching designs in my notebook margins. "Why can't you focus?" Like your sister became the soundtrack of my childhood. By 16, while Tracy collected academic awards, I started selling handmade jewelry online. I turned our garage into a tiny workshop, reinvesting every dollar of profit into better materials. "It's just a hobby," my father dismissed when I showed him my first month of sales. "Focus on your college applications. That's your future." Senior year arrived with acceptance letters for both me and Tracy. She received a partial scholarship to Cornell, while I got into a state school for business. My parents beamed with pride for her while my acceptance warranted only a nod. During my freshman year at Pennsylvania State, I developed an idea for an e-commerce platform connecting sustainable product makers with environmentally conscious consumers. My business classes seemed too theoretical, too slow for the rapidly evolving digital marketplace. I wanted to build something real. After my first semester, I sat my parents down in our living room to explain my decision to take a gap year and pursue my business idea. "You're throwing your life away," my father declared, his face flushed with anger. "No daughter of mine is becoming a college dropout. This is just laziness, disguised as ambition," my mother added, disappointment etched into her features. What they didn't know was that I'd already spoken with my grandmother, my father's mother, who had always seen something in me that my parents couldn't. She had quietly encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit for years. "You remind me of my father," she told me, during one of our private conversations. "He built a successful hardware store without a high school diploma. Your dad has forgotten where he came from." 2 weeks after the disastrous family meeting, my grandmother called me to her house. She sat me down at her kitchen table and slid an envelope across to me. "This is your college fund," she said. $20,000. Your parents wanted me to hold on to it until you came to your senses." Her eyes twinkled. "I think you already have your senses perfectly intact. Take it. Start your business. Just promise me you'll work harder than anyone else." I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. "I promise, Grandma." 2 months later, she passed away in her sleep. At the funeral, as my family grieved, I made a silent vow to make her proud. I would build something meaningful with or without my parents' approval. They never knew that their own mother had believed in me when they couldn't. That secret funding became the foundation of what would eventually grow into a $20 million company. But that day was still far away. As I packed my bags and moved out of the dorms, ready to begin my unconventional journey. The early days of building Evergreen Market, my sustainable products platform, were the loneliest of my life. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Philadelphia, where my futon doubled as both bed and office. My dining table became command central, covered with notebooks, my laptop, and endless cups of coffee. While friends posted pictures of college parties and campus events, I worked 18-hour days coding the website, reaching out to artisans, and learning everything I could about e-commerce. My parents assumed I was finding myself and would eventually return to college. They didn't know I was building something that would change the trajectory of my life. 6 months in, I had a functioning website and 50 vendors selling everything from bamboo toothbrushes to solar-powered phone chargers. Sales trickled in slowly at first. Some days I'd make just $20 in commission. Other days, nothing. "You can always come home and re-enroll for spring semester," my mother suggested during our weekly phone call, her voice tinged with hope that I'd abandon this phase. I didn't tell her about the venture capital pitch competition I'd entered, or the business plan I'd refined through countless sleepless nights. The breakthrough came unexpectedly at a local sustainability conference. I'd spent my last $300 on a vendor table to showcase the platform. A woman named Sandra Winters stopped by asking detailed questions about my business model and technology. "I like how you think," she said after our 20-minute conversation. "Here's my card. Let's have coffee next week." What I didn't realize then was that Sandra was a partner at Green Future Ventures, a firm specializing in eco-friendly startups. That coffee meeting turned into a $500,000 seed investment, and Sandra becoming my mentor. "You have something special," she told me. "Not just the business model, but your vision. You see connections others miss." With funding secured, Evergreen Market expanded rapidly. I hired 2 developers and a marketing specialist. We moved into a real office in downtown Philadelphia, and our vendor network grew to over 300 artisans within a year. The day we hit our first $1 million valuation, I called my parents hoping they might finally see legitimacy in my work. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly. "Did you hear Tracy made Dean's List again? She's considering Harvard for graduate school." It stung, but I'd grown accustomed to being the family disappointment. 3 years after starting Evergreen, I received an unexpected call from Tracy. "Lee, I don't know who else to talk to," she said, her voice breaking. "Mom and Dad are in trouble. The house is being foreclosed. Dad made some bad investments, and they're too proud to tell anyone." Without hesitation, I contacted my lawyer and had him anonymously purchase my parents' mortgage through a holding company. I arranged for them to receive new payment terms that were manageable on their salaries. They never knew I was behind it. My father told extended family that the bank had made an error and corrected the situation. That same year, Tracy got accepted to Harvard Law School, with only a partial scholarship. The remaining tuition would have bankrupted my parents. Through another anonymous arrangement, I covered the balance. "It's a miracle," my mother told me over the phone. "The Alumni Association selected Tracy for a special scholarship. We're so proud of her." The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they dismissed was silently keeping the family afloat, while they continued praising the daughter who followed their prescribed path. Evergreen continued its growth trajectory, hitting $5 million in valuation by year 4. I expanded our headquarters and team, moving into sustainable product manufacturing alongside our marketplace. We launched our own line of zero-waste household goods, which quadrupled our revenue. My personal life remained almost non-existent. Occasional dates rarely led to second ones when they realized my company would always come first. My closest relationships were with my team members, who shared my vision and work ethic. During a rare visit home for Thanksgiving, I overheard my father talking to my uncle in the garage. "No, Lee still hasn't found a real career," he said, unaware I was approaching. "She's running some internet shop thing, probably barely making ends meet. It's why she never contributes to family gatherings." I stood frozen, holding the pie I'd brought from an artisanal bakery in Philadelphia that had cost over $100. "Such a shame," my uncle replied. "And Tracy doing so well at Harvard. Must be hard having one successful daughter and one who's still finding her way." I quietly returned to the kitchen, setting down the pie and excusing myself to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face. The company I'd built from nothing was now worth $5 million. We employed 37 people. We'd been featured in Entrepreneur magazine. And here was my own father telling family I was unemployed and struggling. That night I made a decision that would guide me through the next phase of my life. I would no longer seek my parents' approval. I would build my company for myself, for my team, and for the sustainable future we were helping create. If my family couldn't see my worth, I would stop expecting them to. Little did I know that decision would be tested sooner than I expected. Just after New Year's, 6 years into building Evergreen Market, Tracy called me in tears. Dad collapsed at school. They think it might be his heart. We're at Memorial Hospital. I immediately chartered a private jet from Philadelphia to Pennsylvania, arriving at the hospital 3 hours later. My mother sat in the waiting room looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. The doctors say he needs a specialized procedure, she explained, her voice hollow. Insurance won't cover most of it. We don't know what we're going to do. The procedure would cost nearly $200,000. Without hesitation, I stepped into the hallway and made a call to my financial advisor. I need to transfer funds immediately, I instructed. It's for a medical procedure. Top priority. When I returned to the waiting room, I sat beside my mother and took her hand. I can cover Dad's medical expenses, I said gently. She pulled her hand away, eyes wide with shock. How could you possibly afford that? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, Lee. My business is doing well, I replied, understating dramatically. Please let me do this. She studied my face for a long moment. Your father won't like accepting charity, especially from you. Her words stung, but I maintained my composure. It's not charity, it's family. After hours of discussion, and with Tracy's support, my mother reluctantly accepted. We told my father I had taken out a special medical loan, sparing his pride the blow of accepting help from his unsuccessful daughter. The procedure was successful, but recovery would be extensive. Dad would need months of rehabilitation and home care. Once again, I stepped in, hiring the best cardiac rehabilitation specialists and arranging for home modifications to accommodate his recovery. During this period, Evergreen Market crossed the $10 million valuation threshold. We expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Toronto. My team had grown to over 100 employees, and I had become the face of sustainable e-commerce in the industry. Between managing my growing company and overseeing my father's care, I barely slept. During one of my hospital visits, I met Ryan Matthews, a cardiac rehabilitation specialist who had been assigned to my father's case. Unlike the men I typically encountered in my professional life, Ryan showed genuine interest in my work without intimidation or competition. He asked thoughtful questions about sustainable business practices and shared his own passion for environmental conservation. Your father's lucky to have such a dedicated daughter, he commented one evening, as we walked to the parking lot. I laughed wryly. He doesn't exactly see it that way. Over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, I found myself opening up to Ryan about my complicated family dynamics. He listened without judgment, offering insights from his own experience with his supportive, though sometimes overbearing, Italian-American family. They sound like they're bursting with pride over your brother's achievements, I noted, after he described his brother's conventional careers in medicine and law. Sure. But they also framed my physical therapy degree and display pictures from my marathons like I've won Olympic gold, he replied with a warm smile. Different paths, same pride. The contrast between his family and mine couldn't have been starker. As my father's condition improved, I arranged for contractors to renovate my parents' home, widening doorways for his wheelchair and installing a first-floor bedroom and bathroom. I covered all expenses while maintaining the fiction of mysterious insurance settlements and hospital charity programs. During one of my visits to oversee the renovations, I overheard my father speaking to a neighbor in the backyard. Yes, Lee is here helping out, he said, his voice still weak from his ordeal. Her boyfriend is quite successful, I gather. Some kind of tech executive. She's finally found stability through him. I stood frozen in the hallway, renovation plans clutched in my hand. Not only could my father not acknowledge my success, but he had invented a fictional narrative where any evidence of my prosperity must come from a man. Ryan and I had been dating for only 2 months at that point. He worked for the hospital and drove a 10-year-old Honda. The stability in my life had been entirely self-created. That evening, Tracy pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You know they still don't get it right," she said quietly, helping me prepare dinner. "I tried showing Mom an article about Evergreen Market that mentioned you as the founder, and she just said it was nice you had a little shop online." "I've stopped expecting them to understand," I replied, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. Tracy hesitated. "The money for my Harvard scholarship. That was you, wasn't it?" I looked up surprised. "How did you figure it out?" The Alumni Association had never heard of the special scholarship when I tried to thank them, she admitted. And then I started noticing other things. The mortgage miracle. Dad's medical care being far better than we could afford. I didn't confirm or deny, but Tracy hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." That night marked a shift in my relationship with Tracy. She became my ally, slowly recognizing the unfairness of our parents' treatment. While she continued her path through law school, we developed a closer bond through regular phone calls and visits that didn't revolve around our parents. As Dad's recovery progressed, his resentment toward me seemed to grow proportionally. The more independent he became physically, the more he seemed to chafe at the invisible debt he owed me. A debt he couldn't acknowledge without recognizing my success. My mother, too, maintained the fiction that my contributions were minimal or came from external sources. At a family dinner celebrating Dad's recovery, she raised a toast to the excellent doctors, the hospital charity program, and of course, Lee's boyfriend, for his generous assistance. Ryan, who was present, shot me a confused look. I simply squeezed his hand under the table and said nothing, having long ago accepted that my parents lived in a reality where my achievement was impossible. What I didn't realize was that a breaking point was approaching that would shatter this delicate, dishonest equilibrium forever. 7 years after founding Evergreen Market, I received the email that would change everything. Green Forward Industries, one of the largest sustainable product conglomerates in the world, wanted to acquire my company for $20 million. I would retain leadership as CEO, with expanded resources and global reach for our mission. After a week of intense negotiations with my legal team, I finalized the details. The paperwork would be signed in 3 days. This was the validation of everything I had worked for, a testament to what I had built from that initial $20,000 investment from my grandmother. For reasons I still can't fully explain, I decided to share the news with my parents in person. Perhaps some childish part of me still yearned for their approval. Perhaps I thought this milestone, a $20 million acquisition, would finally be impressive enough to break through their perceptions. I flew to Pennsylvania without calling ahead, planning to surprise them with both my visit and my news. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar roads to Westbrook, rehearsing different ways to tell them about the acquisition. As I pulled onto my parents' street, I spotted my father in the front yard, chatting with Mr. Dawson from next door. I slowed the car window down, about to call out a greeting when I heard my name. "Lee's doing all right now," my father was saying, leaning on his cane. "Her boyfriend Ryan is some big shot in the tech industry. She's been living off him since they got together. At least she's finally got some stability." I eased my foot back onto the gas and drove past without being noticed, my heart pounding in my chest. After all this time, after everything I'd done, nothing had changed. In his mind, I was still the failure, the college dropout who couldn't succeed on her own. I checked into a hotel downtown, instead of staying at my parents' house as planned. That evening, I called and invited them to dinner at Westbrook's nicest restaurant, claiming I was in town for business and wanted to see them. They arrived at Antonio's Italian Bistro, looking much as they always had, my father distinguished in his blazer, despite the cane my mother perfectly coordinated in a blue dress that matched her earrings. I had reserved a private dining room, knowing the conversation might get uncomfortable. "Tracy sends her regrets," my mother announced as they sat down. "She's preparing for a big case. She's become the star associate at her firm, you know." "That's great," I replied sincerely. Despite everything, I was genuinely proud of my sister's accomplishments. I actually invited her separately. She's driving in tomorrow. The waiter took our orders and I steeled myself for what I'd come to do. Before I could speak, my father launched into a detailed account of Tracy's latest achievements. The partners are already talking about fast-tracking her to junior partner, he said, beaming with pride, youngest in the firm's history. That Cornell education really opened doors for her. My mother nodded enthusiastically. And she's dating a surgeon now. Andrew, Harvard Medical School graduate. I sat quietly letting them extol Tracy's conventional success for nearly 30 minutes. When the main course arrived, my father finally turned to me. So what brings you to town? Some project with Ryan's company. I took a deep breath. Actually, I have some news about my company. Evergreen Market has been acquired by Green Forward Industries for $20 million. The deal closes this week. There was a moment of confusion on their faces, followed by uncomfortable laughter from my father. I think you mean Ryan's company, right? He said, cutting into his steak. Or, is this some kind of project you're helping with? No, Dad. My company. The one I founded 7 years ago. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder. The acquisition is for $20 million, and I'll continue leading the company under the new ownership. My mother put down her fork. Lee, there's no need to exaggerate. We know you help run some kind of online shop. It's commendable, but there's no need to make it sound like something it's not. It's a global e-commerce platform for sustainable products, with offices in 3 countries. I replied evenly, pulling up the acquisition press release draft on my phone and sliding it across the table. We have 162 employees and over 3,000 vendor partners. This isn't an exaggeration. My father glanced at the phone, then pushed it back toward me. Is this some kind of joke? These kinds of companies are run by people with MBAs from Stanford, not college dropouts. Something inside me snapped. 7 years of dismissal, 7 years of creating fictional boyfriends to explain away my success, 7 years of anonymous support that they reattributed to anyone but me. I built this company from nothing, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Remember Grandma's college fund? That was my seed money. Every penny I've earned since then has been through my own work, my own vision. I paid off your mortgage when you were facing foreclosure. I covered Tracy's Harvard tuition. I paid for your medical treatment and home renovations. The color drained from both their faces. That's not possible, my mother whispered. Those were programs, insurance settlements. Those were me, I interrupted. All of it. While you were telling everyone I was unemployed or living off boyfriends, I was silently keeping this family afloat. My father's expression hardened. Now you listen here. If you did these things, and I'm not saying I believe you, it doesn't erase the fact that you threw away your education. A legitimate business requires credentials degrees. Whatever internet scheme you're running might be making money now, but without proper education, it's bound to fail. Dad, I've been running this internet scheme successfully for 7 years, I replied, struggling to keep my composure. The company is valued at $20 million. Harvard Business Review featured our model last year. What more proof of legitimacy do you need? Real success comes from education, not money, he said dismissively. Any flash-in-the-pan website can make money briefly, but sustainable success requires proper credentials. Tracy understands this. She'll have a career that lasts decades, not some trendy business that could collapse tomorrow. I stared at him, finally seeing the truth. This had never been about my success or failure. It had been about control, and their narrow definition of achievement. No amount of money, no level of business success would ever be enough because it hadn't come through the channels they approved of. I'm done, I said quietly, placing my napkin on the table. Done trying to prove myself to you. Done supporting people who can't see my worth. My mother reached for my hand. Lee, you're overreacting. We've always supported you. No, I interrupted. You've tolerated me while waiting for me to conform to your expectations. That's not support. I stood up, leaving enough cash on the table to cover the meal. I wanted to share my achievement with you. I thought maybe this would finally be enough. I see now that nothing ever will be. My father's face flushed with anger. This is exactly the kind of dramatic, immature behavior we've come to expect from you. You've always chosen the easy path, and now you want recognition for it. Get out of here, you lowlife. You've never amounted to anything in our team. Eyes. And you never will. The restaurant fell silent. Several diners at nearby tables turned to stare. My mother looked mortified, but made no move to contradict him. I felt strangely calm. After years of seeking their approval, their validation, something inside me had finally accepted the truth. It would never come. Okay, I said simply. Goodbye. As I walked out of the restaurant, I texted Tracy. Had dinner with Mom and Dad. It didn't go well. I'm heading to my beach house in Florida. Call me when you can. What I didn't tell any of them was that the beach house was a $5 million oceanfront property in Naples that I'd purchased the previous year. They had no idea I owned multiple properties or that I'd been living in a penthouse in Philadelphia for the past 3 years. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free of the weight of their expectations. I would no longer shape my narrative to fit their limited understanding. I would no longer hide my success or anonymously support people who couldn't recognize my worth. Tomorrow, I would begin a new chapter on my own terms. The drive to the airport that night felt like crossing a boundary between two lives. Behind me lay years of seeking approval and hiding my light. Ahead, a future where I could fully embrace my success and live authentically. I rerouted my return flight from Philadelphia to Naples, Florida. As the plane took off, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. Just heard from Mom. What happened? Call me when you land. I closed my eyes, deciding to deal with family fallout tomorrow. Tonight was for me. Arriving at my beach house after midnight, I kicked off my shoes at the door and walked straight through to the back deck. The sound of waves crashing on the shore greeted me like an old friend. I sat on the steps leading down to the beach and finally allowed myself to cry, not from sadness but from relief. The constant performance, the downplaying of my achievements, the anonymous financial support, it was over. I slept deeply that night and woke to sunshine streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. My Florida home was everything. My parents' house wasn't open, light-filled, and designed exactly to my taste. Modern furnishings in shades of blue and white complemented the ocean view with sustainable materials throughout, showcasing many products from evergreen market vendors. Over coffee on the deck, I finally called Tracy. Dad is furious, she said, without preamble. Mom is in damage control mode with the neighbors. Apparently, several people from church were at Antonio's last night and witnessed everything. I'm done managing their feelings about my life. I replied, watching pelicans dive into the ocean. I've spent years hiding my success to protect Dad's ego. Is it true? Tracy asked quietly. About the mortgage and my tuition. Yes, all of it. The line went silent for a moment. I don't know what to say, Lee. I had no idea things were so bad between you and them. It's not your fault, I assured her. You followed their approved path. I didn't. It's that simple. Where are you now? She asked. My beach house in Naples. You have a beach house? In Naples, Florida? Her surprise was evident. Lee, how successful is your company exactly? I laughed despite myself. The $20 million valuation I mentioned at dinner was real. The acquisition closes tomorrow. I've owned this place for about a year. Tracy exhaled audibly. I feel like I don't know my own sister. I've been so wrapped up in my own world, my own achievements. We've both been playing the roles assigned to us, I said gently. You're the academic success. I'm the family disappointment. It's time we both stepped out of those boxes. We talked for nearly 2 hours, truly connecting as adults for the first time. Tracy confessed her own struggles with our parents' expectations and the pressure of being the good daughter. I shared stories of building Evergreen from nothing, the challenges and triumphs along the way. I want to see this beach house, she declared finally, and meet the real Lee, not the watered-down version you've been showing the family. Come anytime, I offered. There's plenty of room. The next few days were a blur of calls with my legal team finalizing the acquisition. Ryan flew down for the weekend, seeing my Florida home for the first time. "This explains why you never invited me to your place in Philadelphia," he joked, taking in the expansive oceanfront property. "You were worried I'd think you were showing off." "Something like that," I admitted. "I've spent so long downplaying my success that it became second nature." Ryan wrapped his arms around me as we stood on the deck watching the sunset. "You don't have to downplay anything with me. I fell for the hardworking, brilliant CEO, not some watered-down version." Over the following weeks, I settled into a new routine. Mornings began with beach walks, followed by virtual meetings with my now expanded team. Afternoons involved working from my home office, overlooking the ocean, while evenings were spent exploring Naples or hosting small gatherings with new friends, other entrepreneurs and business owners I'd met since moving. The community I found in Naples surprised me. Unlike my hometown, where my parents' narrative about me had shaped others' perceptions, here, people accepted me as I presented myself a successful businesswoman who valued connection and authenticity. Tracy visited 3 weeks after I'd moved, marveling at the house and listening intently as I gave her a virtual tour of Evergreen's operations. "I can't believe you built all this," she said, as we sat on the beach toes buried in the sand. "And I can't believe none of us saw it." "You weren't supposed to," I replied. "I made it easy for everyone to dismiss me, because rejection hurt less when people didn't know what they were actually rejecting." Tracy leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't see past their narrative." "You're seeing now," I said simply. "That's what matters." I began therapy with Dr. Carlson, a psychologist specializing in family dynamics. Our weekly sessions helped me process years of conditional approval and emotional manipulation. "Your parents created a narrative where your success threatened their worldview," she observed during one session. "Rather than adjust their beliefs, they rejected the evidence." "Will they ever see me clearly?" I asked. "That's not something you can control," she replied gently. "The question is, does their validation still matter to you?" It was a question I contemplated daily as I walked the shoreline each morning. The further I got from that explosive dinner, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped by seeking my parents' approval. Every anonymous financial contribution, every downplayed achievement had been an attempt to help them save face while still supporting them. Ryan became a steady presence in my new life, flying down every other weekend. Unlike my parents, he celebrated my success without feeling threatened by it. We talked about the future, his interest in opening a specialized rehabilitation clinic, my vision for Evergreen, under the new ownership. "I've never met anyone like you," he told me one evening, as we watched the sunset from my deck. "Most people with your level of success would be boastful, but you've spent years hiding it." "Old habits," I admitted, "but I'm learning to own my achievements." The professional freedom that came with the acquisition was exhilarating. With Green Forward's resources behind me, Evergreen expanded into new markets and product categories. My team grew, and I established a secondary office in Naples to allow for my new location. Just as I was settling into this new chapter, my phone lit up with a notification that would lead to the next unexpected turn in my story. Forbes magazine had selected me for their 30 Under 40 feature on self-made millionaires. The cover would include my photo and a feature story about Evergreen's sustainable business model. After years of hiding in the shadows, I was about to be thrust into the spotlight in a way my parents couldn't ignore. The Forbes issue hit newsstands exactly 3 weeks after I'd moved to Florida. My face stared back from the cover alongside the headline, "The Future is Green: How Lee Thompson Built a 20 Million Sustainable Empire from Her College Fund." The in-depth article detailed Evergreen's journey from startup to industry leader, including the recent acquisition. It mentioned my background as a college dropout who had identified a market need that traditional business education hadn't yet recognized. There was even a photo spread featuring my Naples beach house, described as a showcase for sustainable luxury living. Tracy called the moment the digital edition went live, "You're on the cover of Forbes. This is unreal." I laughed, still adjusting to the public recognition myself. The photographer made me pose on the beach like some kind of eco-warrior princess. I felt ridiculous. "You look powerful and confident," she countered. "Exactly what you are." Later that afternoon, my phone rang with my parents' number. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Lee." My mother's voice sounded strange. We just saw the magazine. Forbes. Is that really you?" "Yes, Mom. That's really me." A long pause followed. "The article says your company sold for $20 million. That can't be right." "The valuation was $20 million, I corrected. "The acquisition terms are confidential, but the figure in the article is accurate." Another pause. "And the house in Florida?" They showed pictures. "I'm sitting on its deck right now." I confirmed, watching waves crash on the shore. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her voice held an odd mixture of hurt and disbelief. I took a deep breath. "I tried, Mom. At dinner 3 weeks ago, Dad called me a lowlife and told me to get out." "He didn't mean that," she said quickly. "He was just surprised by your claims." "They weren't claims. They were facts. Facts I've been hiding for years, because neither of you could accept that I succeeded without following your prescribed path." The line went quiet again. "Your father would like to speak with you," she said finally. I steeled myself as his voice came through. "Lee, is this some kind of publicity stunt?" he demanded without greeting. "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied evenly. "No, it's not a stunt. It's my actual life, the one I've been living while you've been telling everyone I'm unemployed or financially dependent on boyfriends." "You should have told us," he said, his tone accusatory. "I tried countless times. You weren't interested in hearing it." "Well," he huffed, "this changes things. Your mother and I would like to come visit you. See this beach house for ourselves." His presumption was so typical that I almost laughed. No apology, no acknowledgement of his behavior, just an expectation that now that my success had been publicly validated, he was entitled to access it. "This isn't a good time," I replied. "I'm still settling in, and the acquisition has my schedule packed. Maybe in a few months." "Nonsense," he dismissed. "We're your parents. We don't need a formal invitation. We'll fly down next weekend." Before I could object further, he hung up. I sat staring at my phone in disbelief. "Problem?" Ryan asked, joining me on the deck with 2 glasses of wine. "My father just invited himself to visit next weekend," I explained. "Apparently now that Forbes has verified my success, they're ready to acknowledge it." Ryan took my hand. "What do you want to do?" "Part of me wants to tell them not to come," I admitted. "But another part thinks maybe this is the reckoning we need to have." I called Tracy immediately, after explaining our parents' self-invitation. "I'm coming too," she declared. "You shouldn't face them alone." "You don't have to get in the middle of this," I protested. "I've been in the middle my whole life," she replied. "It's time I picked a side. The right side." The week passed in a blur of preparation, not just for my parents' visit but for the next phase of Evergreen's expansion. The acquisition had brought new responsibilities and opportunities that kept me working long hours, despite the beautiful setting. Friday afternoon arrived with a text from Tracy. "Just picked up Mom and Dad at the airport. Dad bought the Forbes issue at the terminal and hasn't put it down. Heading your way. ETA 45 minutes. I paced the length of my deck, rehearsing what I might say. Ryan had arrived the previous evening, and now stood in the kitchen, preparing a light lunch, giving me space to process my thoughts. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the front door. My parents stood there looking oddly diminished, my father, without his usual air of authority, my mother clutching her purse like a shield. Tracy stood slightly behind them, offering me an encouraging smile. "Welcome to Naples," I said, simply stepping aside to let them enter. Their eyes widened as they took in the soaring ceilings, wall-to-wall ocean views, and elegant decor. "You live here?" my mother asked, her voice small. "For about a month now," I confirmed, "since the night Dad called me a lowlife at Antonio's." My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. The magazine article. It says you founded Evergreen Market 7 years ago, right after you left college. Yes. With Grandma's blessing and the college fund she controlled, I added, watching his expression closely. His eyebrows shot up. My mother gave you the money to drop out. She invested in my vision, I corrected. She believed in me when no one else did. Ryan emerged from the kitchen. Lunch is ready whenever you are. I've set up on the deck. After awkward introductions, we moved outside, where a spread of sandwiches and salads awaited. The tension was palpable as we settled into the outdoor dining set, overlooking the beach. So my father began clearing his throat. This acquisition, $20 million. That's significant. The company's valuation was $20 million, I explained again. The actual terms included stock options and performance incentives that could make the final figure considerably higher. And you've been running this company all along? My mother asked. Since the beginning. I founded it, built the platform, secured the initial vendors and investors, hired every employee. Yes. My father shifted uncomfortably. The article mentioned you paid for Tracy's Harvard tuition anonymously and referenced other family support. Tracy interjected. She saved your lives, Dad, financially and literally with your medical care. My father's face flushed. We didn't ask for charity. It wasn't charity, I said quietly. It was family. The family you claimed I was letting down by not following the traditional path. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table, in silent support. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Why didn't you tell us about the company's success? I tried. Countless times. You both created narratives to explain away any evidence of my success. When I had a nice car, it must have been a boyfriend's. When I could afford expensive gifts, I must have been in debt. When I offered financial help, you invented scholarships and insurance settlements to explain it. My father stared out at the ocean, his jaw working. We always wanted what was best for you. No, I contradicted gently. You wanted what you understood. College, graduate school, a traditional career. When I chose differently, you couldn't accept that it might also lead to success. We were worried, my mother insisted. Dropping out of college is usually the beginning of a downward spiral. For some people, maybe. For me, it was the beginning of building something meaningful, something that has created hundreds of jobs and helped thousands of sustainable vendors grow their businesses. My father turned back from the view, his expression unreadable. The Forbes article says, "You're worth over $15 million personally." Dad, Tracy admonished. That's really not the point. It's okay, I assured her. Yes, that's approximately correct. The acquisition made me financially independent for life, assuming I don't make wildly irresponsible choices. And all this time he continued gesturing at the house. While we were worried about you struggling, you were here. I bought this place last year, I corrected. Before that, I had a penthouse in Philadelphia. But yes, while you were telling family and friends I was unemployed or living off boyfriends, I was building a multi-million-dollar company. Ryan stood up. I think I'll give your family some privacy. I'll be in the guest room if you need me. He kissed the top of my head before heading inside, understanding intuitively that this conversation needed to happen without an audience. Once he'd gone, my mother burst into tears. I don't understand why you kept this from us. Tracy snorted in disbelief. Are you serious right now? She didn't keep it from you. You refused to see it. Tracy, I cautioned. It's okay. It's not okay, she insisted. They've been dismissing your achievements for years while praising me for following their prescribed path. Then they had the nerve to show up here, expecting a warm welcome, after Dad publicly humiliated you. My father's face darkened. Now listen here. No, you listen, Tracy interrupted, surprising all of us with her vehemence. For years I've watched you dismissively belittle her choices and rewrite her successes to fit your narrow worldview. I didn't say anything because I benefited from being the good daughter. I'm done being silent. I reached for her hand, oddly moved by her defense. For so long we'd been positioned as competitors in our parents' eyes. This solidarity was new and precious. My father stood up abruptly and walked to the edge of the deck, gripping the railing with both hands. For a long moment he stared out at the ocean. When he turned back, his expression had changed. "I was wrong," he said, the words seeming to physically pain him. "I couldn't see past my own definitions of success. Couldn't believe that the path I didn't understand could lead to this." He gestured at the house, the view, the life I'd built. My mother joined him, placing a hand on his arm. We both were. We were so focused on credentials and degrees that we couldn't see you were building something extraordinary. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from either of them. Not quite "I'm sorry," but an admission of error nonetheless. "I kept supporting you financially, because despite everything you're my family," I said softly. "But I needed more than financial reciprocity. I needed you to see me, to believe in me." "The Forbes article," my father said haltingly. "It mentioned your grandmother gave you her blessing along with the money. Is that true?" I nodded. Her exact words were that I reminded her of her father, your grandfather, who built a successful business without formal education. "She said you'd forgotten where you came from." He flinched as if struck. "She never told me she was giving you the money. She knew you would have tried to stop her," I replied simply. "She believed in me when no one else did. Every success I've had grew from that initial faith in my vision." The conversation continued for hours, moving from the deck to the living room as afternoon turned to evening. Old wounds were exposed, years of misunderstandings unraveled. Tracy acted as both mediator and ally, helping translate between our parents' traditional worldview and my unconventional path. My mother asked detailed questions about Evergreen for the first time, genuinely curious about what I'd built. My father listened more than he spoke occasionally, asking clarifying questions about the business model or growth strategy. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the living room, my phone rang with a call from my executive team. I excused myself to take it privately in my office. "Lee, the official offer just came through," my CFO announced without preamble. "They've increased the acquisition offer to $50 million, based on last quarter's performance. We need your decision by tomorrow." I sat down heavily in my office chair, staring out at the ocean, as the implications sank in. $50 million. Complete financial independence. Expanded resources for Evergreen's mission. When I returned to the living room, my family looked up expectantly. "Good news?" Tracy asked, noting my expression. I nodded slowly. "The acquisition offer has been increased to $50 million based on our recent performance." The room fell silent. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. I think my mother said carefully, "This calls for a celebration. Your achievement, it's extraordinary, Lee. Truly." Coming from her, those simple words of acknowledgement meant more than she could possibly know. Not because I still needed their validation, but because it signaled the possibility of a new relationship, one based on who I actually was, not who they had wanted me to be. The journey ahead would not be simple. Years of dynamics wouldn't change overnight. But as we gathered around my dining table that evening, sharing a meal, and cautiously rebuilding bridges, I felt something I hadn't experienced with my parents in years. Hope. 6 months later, I stood on my deck watching waves crash against the shore, reflecting on how much had changed. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the sand as I sipped my coffee, listening to the rhythmic sound of the ocean. Behind me, the beach house bustled with activity. My parents had arrived yesterday for their now monthly visit, my mother already in the kitchen making her famous blueberry pancakes. Tracy would arrive this afternoon, with her fiancé James. Not the Harvard surgeon my parents had once touted, but an environmental lawyer she'd met through her work with Evergreen's legal team. The path to healing our family relationships hadn't been straightforward. After that initial confrontation 6 months ago, we'd established new boundaries and expectations. Regular family therapy sessions had helped us communicate more honestly, though old patterns occasionally resurfaced during stressful moments. My father had struggled the most with our new dynamic. Years of defining himself through academic achievement and traditional success had made it difficult for him to fully embrace my unconventional path. Yet I'd seen genuine effort from him, questions about my business that showed real interest, references to articles he'd read about sustainable commerce, even pride when introducing me to his friends as my daughter, the CEO. My mother had adapted more readily, finding joy in finally getting to know the real me rather than the watered-down version I'd presented for years. She'd visited Naples more frequently than my father, sometimes staying for a week at a time, curious about my daily life and the business I'd built. The acquisition had finalized at $50 million, with me retaining leadership as CEO and gaining expanded resources for Evergreen's mission. The company had grown to over 200 employees across 4 countries, with our sustainable product lines expanding into new categories monthly. With financial security beyond anything I'd imagined, I'd established the Thompson Foundation for Entrepreneurial Innovation, focusing on supporting young entrepreneurs without traditional education credentials. The foundation provided seed funding, mentorship, and resources to those who, like me, saw opportunities that conventional wisdom missed. My father had surprised me by asking to serve on the foundation's advisory board, offering his educational expertise to help bridge the gap between traditional academic paths and unconventional success. It was his way of acknowledging that both approaches had value, something I never thought I'd see. The sliding door opened behind me, and Ryan stepped out onto the deck, wrapping his arms around me from behind. After nearly a year together, we'd settled into a comfortable rhythm-splitting time between his newly opened specialized rehabilitation clinic in Naples and my expanded Evergreen offices. "Your mom's pancakes are almost ready," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. "And your dad is setting up for the presentation." I smiled, leaning back against him. I still can't believe he volunteered to present the first foundation grants. "People can surprise you when you give them the chance," Ryan replied. Inside, my father had indeed transformed the living room for the small ceremony we'd planned for today. 5 young entrepreneurs would receive the foundation's inaugural grants, each pursuing innovative solutions to environmental challenges without traditional educational backgrounds. My father would present the awards, a symbolic passing of the torch, from his generation's definition of success to a broader, more inclusive vision. As we gathered around the dining table for breakfast, I observed the changes in my family with quiet amazement. Tracy chatted animatedly about her environmental law work, my father listening attentively rather than steering the conversation back to academic credentials. My mother had abandoned her perfect hostess persona, happily serving slightly burned pancakes while laughing at her own culinary missteps. "I was thinking," my father said, as he poured maple syrup on his stack of pancakes, "the foundation might consider a partnership with Westbrook High School. Create some kind of entrepreneurial program for students who might not be college-bound." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're suggesting a program for non-college-bound students. Who are you, and what have you done with Jack Thompson?" He chuckled, shaking his head ruefully. "Let's just say I've had my definitions of success thoroughly recalibrated. Seeing what you've built without a degree forced me to question a lot of assumptions." "I think that's a wonderful idea," I replied sincerely. "We could pilot it at Westbrook and then expand to other schools if it works well." "Your grandmother would be proud," he added quietly. "Of all of this, she always saw something in you that I was too rigid to recognize." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." After breakfast, we moved to the beach for a morning walk, a new family tradition during these gatherings. My mother linked her arm through mine as we strolled along the shoreline. "I want to apologize," she said suddenly, "for all the years we couldn't see you clearly, for making you feel you had to hide your light." "You don't need to keep apologizing, Mom," I assured her. "We're moving forward now." "I know, but it needs to be said." She squeezed my arm. "You were extraordinary all along. We just couldn't see it because it didn't fit our narrow definition of success. I'm sorry we missed so much of your journey." Ahead of us, my father and Ryan were deep in conversation, gesturing animatedly about something. Tracy and James followed behind them, hand in hand. The sight of my family whole, healing, and accepting filled me with profound gratitude. By afternoon, our beach house had filled with guests for the foundation ceremony. The 5 grant recipients, ranging from a 19-year-old developing biodegradable packaging to a 32-year-old former service worker creating a revolutionary water filtration system, sat nervously in our tamur living room as my father prepared to present their awards. Education comes in many forms, he began, surprising me with his opening words. For too long I believed that traditional academic paths were the only route to meaningful success. My daughter Lee proved me wrong by building a $20 million company now valued at $50 million without completing college. He gestured toward me with unmistakable pride. The Thompson Foundation for Entrepreneurial Innovation exists because sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from unexpected places. Today we recognize 5 individuals who, like Lee, saw opportunities where others didn't and pursued them with determination and vision. As I watched my father present each grant with genuine enthusiasm, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From being called lowlife and uneducated trash to this moment of public acknowledgement and respect, the transformation seemed almost unbelievable. After the ceremony, as guests mingled on the deck, enjoying catered refreshments, Ryan pulled me aside. "I have something to ask you," he said, a nervous edge to his voice. Before I could respond, he dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. The conversations around us quieted as guests noticed what was happening. "Lee Thompson," he said, his voice steady. "Despite his evident nerves, I've watched you rebuild your relationship with your family while running a global company and establishing a foundation. Your strength, vision, and compassion inspire me daily. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Through tears of joy, I nodded, pulling him to his feet and into my arms as our gathered friends and family applauded. My parents approached, both embracing us with genuine happiness. "Welcome to the family officially," my father told Ryan, clapping him on the shoulder, "though it seems you've been part of it for some time already." As the celebration continued into the evening, I found a quiet moment alone on the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The journey from rejection to this moment of complete acceptance had been painful but necessary. I had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars or degrees but in authenticity, purpose, and connection. My company would continue to grow. The foundation would support others like me. My relationship with Ryan would evolve into marriage. But perhaps the most profound transformation had been internal, the liberation that came from finally standing fully in my truth without diminishing my light to make others comfortable. Tracy joined me on the beach, handing me a glass of champagne. To the most successful Thompson, she toasted with a smile. I shook my head. To finding our own definitions of success, I countered, clinking my glass against hers. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't told you to leave that night?" she asked thoughtfully. "If they had accepted your success right away?" I considered the question, watching waves crash against the shore. I think that moment of complete rejection was necessary. It forced me to stop seeking their approval and fully claim my own path. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most important growth. She nodded slowly. "I've learned more from watching your journey than from all my years of formal education. About courage, authenticity, and forgiveness." "We all have different gifts," I replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Yours is just as valuable as mine." As we returned to the house where our family and friends celebrated, I realized the most profound lesson of my journey. True success isn't found in bank accounts or business valuations, but in the courage to live authentically, even when those closest to you can't understand your vision. Sometimes you have to leave to find yourself, and sometimes those who reject you can eventually become your biggest supporters, but only after you've fully accepted yourself first. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own path? What would you have done in my position? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to follow their unconventional dreams. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the people who can't see your worth aren't the ones who should be defining it.